My name is Imani Harris, and I was 34 the night my mother introduced me to my father's boss as the daughter who had never amounted to much. She said it under rented chandeliers, in a banquet hall full of people who had spent their whole adult lives punching clocks for a plant I quietly owned. I had driven 2.5 hours to be there. I wore my good burgundy coat, the one I saved for board meetings and funerals, because in my family those two events can feel a little too much alike. I walked in smiling like a daughter, not like an owner, not like the woman whose signature sat on the budgets above that whole room. And then my mother put her hand on my shoulder, looked at the most important man in the room and said, "This is our other girl, Imani. Bless her heart, she never really did amount to much. Something with trucks, I think." The boss stared at me, then he stared at his phone. Then he looked back at my mother and said one sentence that changed the sound of that whole room. "Ma'am, your daughter's company signs my paycheck." My father turned around slowly. He had worked for me for 3 years and did not know it. What happened in the next 90 seconds and what my father did 3 days later is why I am finally telling this story. Stay with me, because the quietest person in that room was the one holding the key to every paycheck in it. The invitation came from my sister Portia, which should have warned me to keep my guard up. Portia does not invite, she forwards. She sends things with just enough wording to make you feel like you have already disappointed her. The email landed in my work inbox on a Tuesday afternoon between a warehouse lease renewal and a payroll report. Dad's retirement dinner is on the 14th. Try to dress appropriately. His plant manager will be there, so please do not make this awkward. That was the whole note. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed so hard I had to close my office door. His plant manager will be there. That was what she was worried about. I own a company called Monarch Industrial Group. We are not famous. You will not see my face on a magazine cover at the grocery store. But we are big enough that I have not personally signed my own checks in almost a decade. We own and operate industrial supply businesses in 6 states. Tooling, fasteners, parts distribution, warehousing, freight. Boring things mostly, boring things that keep other people's lights on, and buried 4 layers down in that ownership tree was a plant in Bellevue, Ohio, called Breyer Tool and Fastener, where my father, Roland Harris, had worked for 40 years. My sister did not know that. My mother did not know that. My father, who had walked through that plant door before sunrise for most of my life, did not know that either. I closed the email and did not answer right away. I have learned not to react to my family while the first heat is still in my chest. They trained me young to defend myself, and life trained me later that defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is just another form of unpaid labor. So I looked at the calendar. The 14th. A Friday. I had an owner's call that morning, a lender lunch I could move, and nothing that truly kept me from driving back to Bellevue for the night. I could have skipped it. I had skipped plenty of things by then. Baby showers where my mother introduced Portia as her successful daughter and me as the one who travels. Holiday dinners where my father asked Portia about tax season and asked me if I still drove that truck route. Cookouts where cousins asked me if I had finally settled down, as if building a company was some kind of wandering illness. But 40 years is 40 years. My father had given his body to that plant. His knees, his back, his hearing in one ear, his hands that still had little scars from machines I had never seen. Whatever he had failed to be to me, the work itself had been real. So I answered Portia. "I'll be there." She sent back a thumbs up. Then, a minute later, Mom says please keep it simple if anyone asks about your job. Simple. That was a family word. It meant small enough for my mother to manage. For 12 years, my family had kept a short version of me ready for public use. Imani dropped out. Imani drives trucks. Imani never really got herself together. Sometimes they made it sound sad, sometimes funny. Sometimes they said it with that soft church lady pity that can cut deeper than an insult because everybody pretends it is kindness. At first I corrected them. I said I owned the truck, then I said I owned several trucks, then I said I had a small logistics company, later I said we had acquired a distribution shop, then a warehouse, then another company. Each time, my mother would blink at me like I had spoken in a language she did not plan to learn. "That's nice, baby," she would say. "Portia, tell us about the boys." After a while, I stopped. Not because I was ashamed. That is important. I did not stop because they beat me down. I stopped because I finally understood that my family was not confused. They were comfortable. They had a version of me that made the house make sense. Portia was the responsible daughter, the one with the accountant husband, 2 boys, a nice split level, and a life my mother could describe in one breath. I was the unfinished one, the cautionary tale, the girl who walked away from college and refused to come home humbled. Every family has its private seating chart. Mine had placed me near the exit. If you have ever had relatives keep using an old version of you because the new one would cost them too much pride, leave me a comment when you get a chance. And if you are still listening, subscribe so you can find your way back. Some of us had to build our own rooms before our families admitted we had anywhere to sit. The story did not begin at that retirement dinner. It began 12 years earlier at my parents' kitchen table, under a humming light with a crack in the plastic cover. I was 22. I had left Ohio State 9 credits short of finishing my degree. My mother told people I quit because I could not handle it. That was never true. I left because I had found work that made sense to me and paid better than waiting tables between classes. I was hauling parts on contract for a supplier outside Dayton, sleeping in my cab some nights, keeping a notebook full of rates, fuel costs, maintenance, and routes. I had done the math. 1 box truck, used, ugly, but solid. An $8,000 loan, 6 months to break even if I kept the early route and added weekend runs. 10 months if fuel jumped. I knew which warehouse had overflow freight, which dispatchers paid on time, which mechanics would let me settle invoices on Friday. I knew because I had been listening while everybody else assumed I was just driving. I wrote the whole plan on a yellow legal pad. Routes, margins, payments, insurance, fuel, repairs. My handwriting was careful because I was still young enough to believe carefulness could make people take you seriously. After dinner, I slid it across the table to my father. "I need a co-signer," I told him. "Not money, just a name on the loan. I can make every payment." My father put on his reading glasses. He read slowly, moving one rough finger down the page. My mother washed dishes with her back to us. The television muttered from the living room. Portia was already married by then and not living at home, which meant there was no one in the room to pretend fairness was being considered. When my father finished, he picked up his pen. For 1 second, I thought he was going to ask a question. He did not. He wrote across the bottom of my plan in his square, careful hand. "No. Get a real job." Then he signed it. "Dad." Like a denial letter. My mother turned from the sink, dried her hands, and picked up the paper. She scanned it for maybe 3 seconds. Then she wrote beneath his words. She never amounted to much. She did not say it with anger. That almost made it worse. She said it like a fact she was tired of everybody else being too polite to admit. I remember the sound after that. The faucet dripping once, the refrigerator clicking on, my own breathing trying not to turn into crying in front of them. I folded the paper into quarters and put it in my purse. I did not slam a door. I did not give a speech. I did not call Portia and ask if she thought they were right. I walked out of that kitchen with the legal pad page folded small enough to fit in a wallet, and I promised myself one thing. I would never again ask those 2 people for permission to become myself. I got the loan another way. A credit union officer named Ellis liked numbers more than he liked college transcripts. He asked harder questions than my father had, but at least they were real questions. I answered them. He approved the loan with a rate that made my stomach hurt, and a handshake that changed my life. I bought the truck. It was white once, under all the gray road grime, and it rattled like it was carrying loose change in its bones. I loved it anyway. I loved that it started most mornings. I loved that its problems were honest. A belt snapped, you replaced the belt. A tire wore down, you paid for rubber. A customer lied about payment, you learned to put terms in writing. Nobody smiled at you over potato salad and rewrote your life while pretending it was love. One truck became two. Two became three when I hired a driver named Marcus, who showed up 15 minutes early to every route and never treated the truck like it belonged to nobody. I learned dispatch, then warehousing, then purchasing, then the strange quiet work of buying small businesses from tired owners whose children did not want them. That was how Monarch grew. Not with one big heroic leap. It grew in dull, exhausting steps, in broken sleep, in invoices chased, in payroll Fridays that made my hands shake until the money cleared, in winters where I sat in my office wearing my coat because I had cut the heat in half to keep a driver on staff, in one terrible spring when a customer went bankrupt owing us 4 months and I ate crackers for dinner more times than I care to remember because the employees had families and I had pride. I am not telling you that to sound noble. I made mistakes, plenty. I trusted one man I should not have trusted. I bought one warehouse with a roof so bad I still curse when it rains. I worked too much. I let friendships dry up. I told myself being alone was the same thing as being focused. There are bills you pay for building walls, and some of them do not show up in accounting software, but I built it. By the time I turned 30, Monarch had crossed from hustle into structure. By 31, I had a leadership team. By 32, I could walk through a plant and know in 10 minutes if the manager understood his people or only understood his spreadsheets. By 33, we made our largest acquisition, a sleepy mid-market holding company called Caldwell Supply Holdings. Caldwell owned a handful of regional industrial businesses. Some were healthy. Some needed better systems. All of them did work I understood. We bought the shares at the top, which meant we bought the whole tree. The same managers stayed. The same employees came through the same doors. The same badges worked. To most people on the floor, nothing changed except a few forms and a new name on corporate emails they rarely read. 4 ownership layers down in that tree sat Breyer Tool and Fastener in Bellevue, Ohio. My father's plant. I saw it in the schedule before the deal closed. I will not pretend I did not. There it was in black letters on a spreadsheet, the building that had shaped my childhood. Breyer Tool and Fastener. Roland Harris, senior line mechanic, vested, 37 years at that time. I stared at that line longer than I needed to. Then I signed the deal because it was a good deal. I did not buy it to own my father. That sounds dramatic, and real business is rarely as clean as drama. I bought Caldwell because the companies fit our portfolio, because the numbers were right, because the managers were better than the market understood, and because I knew we could operate them without tearing them apart. But I would be lying if I said I felt nothing when I signed. For 3 years after that, my father worked inside a company I owned and had no idea. He clocked in, he clocked out. He complained at family dinners about new corporate policies, and I would sit with my iced tea and say, "That sounds frustrating." Once he said, "Whoever owns these places now doesn't know what it's like on the floor." I almost laughed into my collard greens. Almost. I did not tell him. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Portia. Not because I was setting a trap. I need you to understand that. I was not waiting for a perfect revenge moment. I was tired. I was busy. And some part of me had made peace with the idea that my real life was safer when my family did not have access to it. They had their story. I had payroll. For a while, that seemed like enough. The summer before the retirement dinner, I went home for my Aunt Denise's birthday cookout. My mother pulled me into the kitchen by the elbow, smiling back toward the deck like she was adjusting a tablecloth and not a daughter. "Now, baby," she said, low enough that nobody else heard, "when people ask what you are doing, let's just keep it plain." "Plain how?" "Logistics," she said. "You can say logistics. That's respectable enough and it does not require a whole explanation." Respectable enough. That was Cassandra Harris in 2 words. She had spent her whole life arranging reality until it looked respectable enough. The right dress for church, the right casserole for a repast, the right tone when speaking to people with money, the right version of each child. I looked at her hand still wrapped around my elbow. I could have told her then. I could have said, "Mama, my company owns Daddy's plant." I could have watched her mouth open and close in that kitchen with the potato salad and the paper plates. I could have ended 12 years of foolishness in one clean sentence. Instead, I said, Sure, logistics. Then I went back outside and listened to cousins talk about a cruise while my mother told a neighbor that Portia had done everybody's taxes again this year. I told myself my silence was mercy. I told myself I was protecting her pride. I told myself I did not need her applause. All of that was partly true, but there was another truth underneath it. Silence had become a habit that served everybody but me. My mother got to keep her story. My father got to keep not asking. Portia got to keep being the successful child, and I got to keep pretending I was above being hurt by it. I was not above it. I was just quiet. The retirement dinner was held at the Bellevue Grand Hall, which sounds grander than it is, but in that town it is where people go when they want an event to feel official. It has chandeliers, heavy carpet, a stage, and a parking lot that floods near the back row when it rains. My mother had been planning the night for 2 months. She treated it like a coronation. There would be almost 80 people, plant workers, shift leads, office staff, old supervisors, church friends, cousins, neighbors, Portia and her husband Trevor, and my father's bowling buddy who still wore cologne strong enough to qualify as weather. There was a banner on the stage. Roland Harris, 40 years of service. There was a slideshow with pictures of my father in his 20s, then 30s, then older, always in a work shirt, always standing somewhere near machinery, like the plant itself had raised him. There was a microphone for speeches. There was a table with a sheet cake. My mother had chosen navy napkins because she said black looked too funeral and red looked too birthday. I drove to Bellevue that afternoon and checked into the Bellevue Motor Inn off the highway. I could have stayed with my parents, but I stopped sleeping in rooms where love came with a performance review. I hung my burgundy coat in the little closet, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at myself in the dark television screen. 34. No husband, no children, no degree, a company in 6 states, a family that still thought I was a cautionary tale. People like to pretend success erases old rooms. It does not. You can sign $1,000,000 credit agreements and still hear your mother's kitchen faucet dripping when someone says the wrong word. Before I left the hotel, I checked one thing on my phone. The RSVP list my assistant had quietly confirmed through Breyer's office. Devin Cole would be there. Devin was the general manager of Breyer Tool and Fastener. He was not my father's direct supervisor day to day, but he ran the plant. He came to Columbus every quarter for our ownership review. 12 times, maybe more, he had sat across from me with binders and spreadsheets and plain answers. Devin was the kind of operator I trusted because he did not decorate bad news. If a line was behind, he said so. If a machine needed replacing, he brought numbers. If he disagreed with corporate, he looked me in the eye and said why. He knew my face. He knew my title. He knew exactly who owned Breyer's parent company. And I knew that if he saw me at my father's retirement dinner, 2 stories were going to collide. I almost stayed at the hotel. I am not proud of that, but it is true. I sat with my keys in my hand and considered sending a text about traffic. Then I thought of my father under that banner. 40 years is still 40 years, even when the man who worked them failed you at a kitchen table. So I put on the burgundy coat and drove over. My mother saw me within 3 steps of the entrance. She had the gift of locating a flaw across a crowded room. "Oh," she said, doing the full scan from my shoes to my hair. "You came." I said I would. "I know. I just never know with you." That was also one of her gifts, making my reliability sound suspicious. She touched the lapel of my coat. "This is nice." "Thank you." "Try not to mention the trucking thing tonight," she said. "These are your father's people." I looked past her at the room full of men and women whose plant rolled up into my company, whose capital budgets I reviewed, whose safety reports crossed my desk. Then I looked back at my mother. "I won't mention the trucking thing." "Good." She smiled like we had made peace when what we had actually done was rehearse a lie. She pulled me toward one of her church friends before I could even take off my coat. "Pearl, you remember our other daughter, Imani." Our other daughter. Not Portia's sister, not Roland's daughter, not founder, not owner, not even my own name without a handle attached. Pearl smiled. It was a sweet smile, honestly. People smile according to the story they have been given. If somebody tells you a woman is a little lost, you smile at her like you are leaving a porch light on. Of course, Pearl said. How are you, baby? Still traveling? Some, I said. My mother gave me the smallest approving nod, as if I had passed a test. Portia found me by the drinks table. She was wearing cream, which was bold for a barbecue sauce dinner, and a bracelet I knew she could not afford. Trevor followed behind her with the face of a man who had learned silence was cheaper than honesty. You made it, Portia said. Here I am. She air-kissed my cheek. Mom's nervous, so please just behave. Nice to see you too. I'm serious, Imani. Daddy worked 40 years for this. Don't come in here with that independent woman attitude. I almost asked her what attitude she meant. The one that paid vendors on time? The one that understood debt covenants? The one that kept 632 people employed at last count? But Portia did not want an answer. She wanted the old shape of me to stay available. So I said, "The room looks nice." She blinked. Compliments confuse people who arrive ready for a fight. It should, she said. Some of us actually helped. I knew what that meant. Portia wanted me to know she had paid for something or arranged something or been trusted with something. In my family, usefulness was currency, and Portia was always afraid her account might be overdrawn. I had learned over the years that her digs about me were not only cruelty, they were fear. She and Trevor had more debt than they admitted. A kitchen remodel that kept getting mentioned too proudly. A second SUV, a private school bill for the older boy because Portia said public school didn't fit him. My parents had helped them in little ways for years, calling loans gifts and gifts normal family support. Portia needed to remain the good daughter because the good daughter got rescued without being called needy. If I stopped being the family failure, everybody would have to recalculate. She lifted her glass. Just don't make tonight about you. I don't plan to. And I meant it. That is one of the strange truths of that night. I did not walk in intending to reveal anything. I did not need a room full of my father's co-workers to know what I had built. I did not need my mother's friends clapping with chicken on their plates. I had lived too many hard years to mistake attention for respect. Across the room, my father stood near the stage under his own banner, shaking hands, laughing, glowing in a way I rarely saw at home. He had on a dark suit that fit him badly around the shoulders because his body was still built like a man who lifted things for a living. His hair had gone mostly silver. His hands looked large and stiff around a paper cup of punch. I felt tenderness then, sudden and inconvenient. My father had not been a warm man. He was steady in public and distant at home. He believed work was what made a person real, which should have made him understand me better. Instead, it made him dismiss anything he did not recognize as work. To him, my company had never become real because he had never been curious enough to look. But watching him that night, smiling while younger men asked for stories, I could see the part that was real, the pride of surviving 40 years in one place, the dignity of being remembered by people who knew how hard that was. For a minute, I let myself just be his daughter. Then one of the younger floor guys asked, "You got daughters, right, Mr. Harris?" My father smiled. "Portia's my oldest, accountant, good head on her shoulders, married, 2 boys. Then came the pause. The pause was always where I lived. "And Imani," he said. "She's in trucking, I think. We don't see her much." Not cruel, that was the thing. If he had been trying to hurt me, it would have been easier to hate. But he sounded uncertain because he was uncertain. He had never bothered to become informed. A filled slot does not ask questions. An older man peeled away from the circle and came toward me. Gideon Tate, my father's oldest friend at the plant. When I was little, Gideon used to bring peppermints from his lunch pail and wink like we were doing business. He had a limp now, and his beard had gone white, but his eyes were the same warm brown. "Imani Harris," he said. "Look at you." "Mr. Tate." "Don't you Mr. Tate me. I changed your bicycle tire when you were 9. I laughed for real. He leaned closer. "Tell me the truth. What are you doing these days? And don't say trucking. Your mama's been saying trucking for too long, and I never did believe it covered the whole thing. I looked at him. That simple question, asked without a trap in it, almost undid me more than my mother's insults ever could. I run a company now, I said. Industrial supply, freight, warehousing, some acquisitions. He nodded slowly, pleased but not surprised. I figured there was more to it. You always watched everything. Even as a child. Watching is free. And useful, he said. Before I could answer, my mother's voice rang through the hall. All right, everyone, let's find our seats. We are going to do the toasts before the chicken gets cold. Of course she had a schedule. Cassandra Harris loved a schedule because a schedule could make chaos look obedient. She moved around the room like a stage manager, touching shoulders, pointing people to tables, collecting attention. I watched her place Portia near the microphone. Portia is going to say a few words on behalf of the children, she announced. The children. There were two of us. One of us had not been asked. I found my seat near the back. Not at the main family table, but at the outer edge of family, where I had been placed with a cousin, an old neighbor, and a retired supervisor who kept asking the server if the green beans had bacon in them. I was not surprised. That matters too. Surprise requires some faith that things might be different. I sipped water and watched my mother arrange her little kingdom. Then the side door opened. Devin Cole stepped in, wearing a gray suit and shaking rain from his coat. My stomach tightened once, then settled. He paused just inside the door, scanning the room the way plant managers scan any space they enter. Habit, exits, faces, problems. His eyes passed over the cake table, the stage, my father, my mother, then landed on me. Recognition moved across his face in pieces, first warmth, then confusion, then calculation. The owner of Monarch Industrial Group was sitting at a retirement dinner in Bellevue, Ohio, not at the head table, not being greeted by management, but tucked near the back with a water glass and her coat still on. He started to lift his hand. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not now. He saw it. Devin was sharp enough to see small signals and decent enough not to turn them into theater. He let his hand fall and moved toward the bar. I need you to notice that, because it matters. I was not ambushed. I saw the collision coming. I chose not to step in front of it. There is a difference between setting a trap and refusing to rescue a lie from the truth. Still, I needed air. I slipped into the hallway near the coat check, where the music became a muffled thump and the light turned soft. I opened my purse and took out my wallet. Inside, behind my company card and a photo of my nephew from when he still hugged me without checking whether Portia approved, was the yellow legal pad page. 12 years had made the creases soft. The paper had thinned at the folds. My handwriting still marched down the page, earnest and tight. Roots, margins, fuel, insurance, $8,000. At the bottom, my father's handwriting, no, get a real job, Dad. Beneath it, my mother's slanted words. She never amounted to much. People have asked me why I kept it. They assume it was bitterness. It was not. Bitterness takes maintenance. You have to feed it. I had too much work to do. I kept that paper as a boundary I could touch. Whenever I felt tempted to bring my family another piece of my life and ask them to bless it, I opened that page and reminded myself that the wrong judges can ruin a good case. Not because the case is weak, but because the court was never honest. I folded it back and slid it into my wallet, right beside the black Monarch card tied to bank accounts that made $8,000 look like a clerical note. Then I looked in the hallway mirror. You are not 22, I told myself. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. When I walked back into the hall, my mother had seen Devin. I could tell by the way her posture changed. She knew exactly who he was. The plant manager. The big man. The one whose opinion would polish my father's night and, by extension, polish her. To my mother, important people were not people first. They were mirrors. She approached them hoping to see respectability reflected back. She abandoned her toast schedule in mid-motion. I watched her catch Portia by the wrist, then turn until she found me. There you are, she said brightly. Too brightly. Come on, both of you. I want Mr. Cole to meet the family. The family, not us. The display. Portia fell into step beside me as my mother led the way. "Let Mom talk," Portia whispered. "Please, she's good with business people. Just smile and say logistics if he asks." "I won't bring up the truck thing," I said. "I'm serious." "So am I." She looked at me then. Really looked. Something about my calm made her nervous. Portia has always mistaken calm for arrogance because she cannot imagine silence that is not hiding fear. "Don't embarrass Daddy," she said. We were 10 feet from Devin. He had set his drink on a high-top table. His face had gone careful. He looked at my mother, then at Portia, then at me. This time, I gave him the smallest nod. Not an invitation to perform. Permission not to lie. My mother arrived in front of him like she was stepping onto a stage. "Mr. Cole," she said, giving him both hands. "I'm Cassandra Harris, Roland's wife. We are so grateful you came. 40 years. Can you believe it?" Devin shook her hand. "Roland has given a lot to that plant. We're glad to honor him." My mother shone. Praise of my father was praise of the family, and praise of the family was the nearest thing to oxygen she had. A few of her church friends drifted closer. Pearl, Miss Louise, 2 women from the hospitality committee. My father noticed the little circle forming and came from the side, pleased that his boss was there, pleased to be seen near him. Portia lifted her chin. Trevor hovered behind her, already looking for the safest expression. My mother placed her hand on Portia's back first. "These are our girls," she said. "This is Portia, our oldest. She's an accountant, married, 2 sweet boys. Just a blessing. Keeps all of us straight." Portia gave a modest little laugh she had practiced somewhere. Then my mother's hand moved to my shoulder. I felt the weight of it through the burgundy wool. The steering hand, the presenting hand, the hand that could make a daughter feel like an item being priced for sale. Her fingers tightened. The hall noise continued around us. Forks, laughter, the slideshow music, a chair leg scraping. But the little circle had become clear and sharp. Devin looked at me. I looked back. My mother sighed. It was a small sigh, but I knew it. That sigh had introduced my smallness to rooms for 12 years. "And this is Imani," she said, "our other daughter. Bless her heart, she never really did amount to much. We're honestly not even sure what she does anymore. Something with trucks." A couple of church friends gave the soft laugh. Portia smiled into her wine. My father looked down at the carpet. That was the part I saw, and the part I remembered later more than my mother's words. My father looking down, not shocked, not confused, just unwilling to interrupt the sentence being used to bury me. I did not flinch. The legal pad page in my wallet felt almost warm against my side, though I know paper does not do that. Memory does. She never really did amount to much. My mother had said it in kitchens, at showers, in church parking lots, at family reunions, to neighbors and cousins and people who knew me as a rumor. But this time she had said it to Devin Cole, the man who sat across from me every quarter, the man whose capital requests I approved, the man who had a fresh owner's summary from me in his phone because I had sent it the week before. Devin did not speak at first. His silence changed the air. He looked at my mother. Then he looked at me. Then, almost by reflex, he reached into his jacket and pulled his phone halfway out. I saw the screen light against his palm. He did not need to show it to me. I knew what would be near the top of his email. Monarch Owner's Review, Briar Tool and Fastener, action items, my name at the bottom, Imani Harris, founder and CEO. He looked back up. My mother misread his silence. She thought he was uncomfortable because she had told the sad truth about her lesser child. "I know," she said, patting my arm. "Every family has one. We love her anyway, of course. Every family has one." She said that too. The words left her mouth and settled over the circle like dust. Devin set his drink down slowly, not dramatically, carefully, like a man putting a lit match on a metal tray. I need to pause right there, because there was one more thing nobody in that room knew. The week before the dinner, during Briar's quarterly review, a retirement package had crossed my desk. 40 years of service, full vested pension, a service bonus. A small consulting offer for 6 months if the plant needed my father's knowledge during the transition. It came with the usual approvals, and because of the amount and structure, it needed my sign-off. The name on the folder was Roland Harris, my father. I had sat alone in my office with that folder open and the yellow legal pad page in my wallet. I had stared at his name. I had thought about the kitchen table. I had thought about get a real job. I had thought about every Thanksgiving where he asked Portia about her work and asked me nothing at all. Spite was available to me. I will not lie about that. It sat there like a cliff edge, but I did not step off. I approved the package exactly as human resources and plant leadership had recommended it. Fair, clean, no punishment, no extra reward to buy a feeling from myself, just the same respect any 40-year employee had earned. I signed it because business is not supposed to be a weapon for family pain. So when Devin turned toward my mother, I was the only person there who knew my father's retirement had already passed through my hands untouched. The daughter they called unfinished had protected the ending of his work life before she had any reason to believe he would ever see her. Devin faced my mother. "Mrs. Harris," he said. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Quiet from the right person can pull a room closer than shouting. My mother smiled. "Yes? I think there has been a serious misunderstanding." Her smile stayed up, but the middle of it cracked. "I'm sorry?" Devin glanced at me. It was not a panic glance, it was a question. He understood quickly that he was standing at the edge of something private and public at the same time. I gave him one small nod. "Go ahead." The circle had gone still. Pearl's hand hovered near her necklace. Portia's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. My father stood just behind my mother's shoulder, wearing the uncertain expression of a man who senses a machine is making a sound it should not make. Devin took one breath. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't think you know who your daughter is." The sentence was not loud, but it traveled. The nearest table quieted, then the next. A man by the cake stopped cutting slices. My mother gave a small laugh that had no air in it. "Excuse me?" Devin looked pained. That is what I remember. He was not enjoying himself. He was a decent man who had been handed a lie too large to let stand. "Your daughter's company owns the company that owns Breyer," he said. "Monarch Industrial Group acquired Caldwell Supply Holdings 3 years ago. Breyer is part of that group." My mother blinked. Portia lowered her glass. My father looked at Devin, then at me. Devin continued, slow and plain. "I report to her every quarter. Her company signs my paycheck." Mine, and every person at that plant, including Roland's. There are silences people choose, and silences that happen to them. That silence happened to the whole room. You could hear the slideshow click to the next picture. My father at about 30, standing by a machine with his hand on the shoulder of a younger coworker. The banner behind the stage hung perfectly straight. The microphone squeaked once when somebody brushed it by accident. My mother stared at Devin. "No," she said, "not loud, not yet." "No, that isn't right. Imani is in logistics." "Monarch does logistics," Devin said gently. "And warehousing, distribution, supply, acquisitions. She is the owner." "She drives," my mother said, reaching for the old shape because it was the only one in reach. Devin shook his head. "She may have started with trucks. She does not just drive them, Mrs. Harris." Someone at the next table whispered, "Wait, Imani owns Breyer?" Then another voice, one of the younger line workers, "That's the owner?" The whisper moved through the room, not like gossip at first, more like math. People were calculating backward. 3 years, new corporate structure, quarterly updates, budget approvals, the daughter at the back table, the mother calling her nothing, the father under the banner. My father turned fully around, slowly. That is exactly how he moved, like his body understood before his pride did. "Imani," he said. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. 3 years? The whole room waited. I thought of a dozen answers, cruel ones, clever ones. Lines a person could put on a coffee mug if she wanted to become the kind of woman her pain kept inviting her to be. I did not use any of them. 3 years, Daddy, I said. That was all. 3 years. For 3 years, he had gone to work under my ownership, complained about corporate decisions at my mother's table, retired under a package I had signed, and told a younger worker he did not really know what I did. And now he knew. My mother's face did something I had never seen. The polite expression stayed in place for half a second after the rest of her collapsed. Then the mask slipped. "This is a stunt," she said. There it was. When the truth was too heavy to lift, she tried to call it an attack. "Cassandra," my father said, but there was no strength in it. "No," she snapped louder now, heads turned from the far tables. "No, Roland. This is exactly like her. She comes in here after all these years, says nothing, lets us look foolish in front of everybody on your night." I stood still. That may have been the hardest thing I did, not the building of Monarch, not the winters in the truck. Standing still while my mother tried to turn her public cruelty into my public wrongdoing. "You did this on purpose," she said to me. "You let me stand here and talk because you wanted to humiliate me." "I let you talk because you were talking," I said. That landed harder than I expected. She flinched. Portia stepped in then, because family systems always have understudies. "Imani, why wouldn't you tell us something like this?" she said. "What kind of person hides that from her own family?" I looked at my sister. Her voice was shaking, but not with hurt only. Fear was in there too. If I was not the failure, what was she? If our parents' judgment had been wrong for 12 years, what else had they been wrong about? If I owned the plant, what did that do to the little throne she had been sitting on? "I tried telling you pieces of it for years," I said. "You all edited them down until they fit the story you liked." "That is not fair," Portia said. "No," I said. "It wasn't." The room had gone so quiet that my voice carried without effort. I did not raise it. I had seen enough boardrooms to know the person who stays calm often becomes the center whether she wants to or not. My mother pointed at me. Her hand trembled. "You could have told me. You let me say that." "Mama," I said, and the old words softened my mouth even though I did not want it to. "You have been saying it for 12 years. Pearl, her church friend, put one hand over her mouth. My mother's eyes flashed. "Because you never explained. I brought you a whole plan when I was 22. My father closed his eyes. There it was. The kitchen table had entered the room. I reached into my purse and took out the folded legal pad page. I did not wave it. I did not perform. I unfolded it carefully because the creases were weak, and I had carried that paper too long to tear it for drama. My mother stared at it like she recognized the color before she recognized the memory. "Do you remember this?" I asked. Nobody answered. I held it where my father could see the bottom. "I asked for a cosigner, $8,000, a truck, roots, margins, repayment. Daddy wrote, 'No, get a real job.' Then he signed it. You wrote, 'She never amounted to much.'" I folded the paper once, slowly. I did not keep this to stay mad. I kept it so I would remember not to bring my worth back to this table. The word table hung strangely in a banquet hall, but everybody understood. Gideon Tate stood near the edge of the circle, eyes wet. He looked at my father like he wanted to shake him and hug him at the same time. My father opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "I didn't know." I looked at him. "You didn't ask." That was the smallest sentence I said all night, and it did the most damage. My mother tried one more time. "Do you have any idea what it is like," she said, voice dropping, "to have people whisper about your family? My father drank. Everybody knew it. People talked about us like we were dirty. I spent my whole life making sure nobody had a reason to look down on us again." For a second, I saw her differently, not as the woman who cut me down in front of people, but as a girl in a pressed dress sitting in a church pew while grown folks whispered about her daddy. Shame can make people build whole houses out of appearances and then call the walls love. I felt the old daughter instinct rise up, the one that wanted to comfort her, to say, "It's all right, Mama," to carry her feelings because I had been trained to pick them up before they hit the floor. Then she lifted her chin. "If you had told me," she said, "I could have been proud. You took that from me." There it was. She had taken my 12 years of work, folded it into her embarrassment, and handed it back as my failure. The sympathy left me quietly. "No," I said. "You do not get to make my silence heavier than your words." She stared at me. "I did not buy a company to embarrass you. I bought it because it was a good company. I did not come tonight to expose anybody. I came because Daddy worked 40 years and I wanted to honor that. You walked me over here. You put your hand on my shoulder. You said what you said to the one man in this building who knew it was false." I turned to Devin, then to the room, because by then the room was no longer pretending not to listen. For clarity, I founded Monarch Industrial Group 11 years ago after starting with one truck. We own industrial supply, distribution, freight, and warehousing businesses across 6 states. 3 years ago, Monarch acquired the holding company that owns Breyer Tool and Fastener. Devin runs Breyer and reports up through our ownership review. That is the business side. Then I looked at my father. "The family side is simpler. I stopped correcting you because I got tired of begging you to be curious." No one moved. Portia was pale beneath her makeup. Trevor had found a spot on the carpet to study. My father's old co-workers looked at him, then at me, then at the banner. My mother sat down suddenly in the nearest chair. Not gracefully. She just seemed to lose the strength to remain standing inside the story she had made. My father put one hand on a high-top table, the same table where Devin had set down his drink, his fingers spread wide against the wood. "The retirement," he said. It was so quiet I almost missed it. But I heard. Of course that was where his mind went. Work, money, security, the package, the last chapter. My mother heard too. Her eyes snapped toward him, and for 1 second fear moved between them like a current. I could have answered right there. I could have told him in front of everybody that his package was safe because I had already approved it. I could have made myself look generous in the same room where they had made me look small. I did not. Some truths are public. Some are not entertainment. "This is not the place for that," I said. My father swallowed. Portia looked at me like I had just become dangerous. That was almost funny. I had always been dangerous to the story. They were just now noticing. My mother recovered enough to stand again. "So what now?" she asked. "You expect everyone to clap?" "No." "You expect us to apologize in front of everybody?" "No." "Then what do you want?" I looked around the room, at Pearl's stricken face, at Gideon still watching my father, at Devin, who looked like he wished his drink had been stronger, at my father under his banner, at Portia holding a wine glass like a shield. What did I want? At 22, I wanted a signature. At 28, I wanted them to ask. At 34, in that hall, I wanted something quieter and more final. "I want you to stop lying about me," I said. That was all. My mother looked as if I had slapped her. "I never lied," she whispered. "You did not know enough to tell the truth." The difference seemed to confuse her. I buttoned my coat. The little sound of the button slipping through fabric felt louder than it should have. "Daddy," I said, "congratulations on 40 years. I mean that. What you gave that plant was real." His face twisted then, and I saw the regret arrive before the words could. But words had never been his strong place. Work was. Silence was. Looking down was. "Imani," he said. I waited. He did not finish. So I did. "I hope retirement gives you time to learn who your daughter is. Not the owner. Your daughter." Then I walked out. No storming. No slammed door. Storming out is for people who need to prove they are leaving. I had already left that version of the family years before. My body was just catching up. The circle parted. Nobody clapped, thank God. Real life is usually kinder than applause in moments like that. Applause would have turned my hurt into a show. Devin gave me a small nod as I passed. It held apology and respect, and a manager's instinctive horror at anything messy happening near a buffet. Gideon followed me to the coat check. "Child," he said softly. I turned. He looked older than he had when the night began. "Your daddy is a good man in a lot of ways," he said, "and a fool in this one." "Both can be true." "They can." He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "You were kinder than most people would have been." "I don't feel kind. Kind doesn't always feel soft." I carried that line with me into the parking lot. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt shone under the lights. I sat in my car for a long time with both hands on the wheel. I did not cry. I know people expect that part, but the tears for my family had come years earlier in truck stops and cheap apartments and one warehouse office where I slept under my desk with a rolled-up sweatshirt for a pillow. What I felt in that parking lot was not victory. It was the strange calm of a bill finally being paid. I drove back to the Bellevue Motor Inn and slept badly. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 5 from Portia, 3 from my mother, 2 from unknown numbers that were probably church friends pretending to check on me while starving for details. 1 text from Devin: "I am sorry for the way that unfolded. I will keep plant operations steady. Let me know if you need anything documented." That last sentence is why Devin was good at his job. Even in family disaster, he understood records. Portia's messages were not apologies. They were damage control. "You need to call Mom. People are talking. Daddy is upset. This could affect his retirement. Please do not make any decisions while angry." That one made me put the phone face down. My mother left 1 voicemail. Her voice was tight and breathless. "Imani, I don't know what you think you accomplished, but your father barely slept. People from church are already asking questions. You need to come by before you leave town so we can discuss how to explain this." How to explain this? Not what she had done, not what she had said, how to explain it. I packed my bag, checked out, and drove back to Columbus without stopping at their house. By Monday morning, the story had traveled through Bellevue with church speed accuracy, which means the emotional facts got there before the technical ones. I heard from Devin that the plant floor was quieter than usual, not hostile, just curious. My father's name came up in corners. My name came up more. I told Devin to keep the business steady and shut down gossip where it touched operations. "No retaliation," I said. "Understood." "No jokes at Roland's expense." "Already handled." "And Devin?" "Yes?" "Thank you for telling the truth without making a meal of it." He was quiet a second. "She said it to my face, Imani. I couldn't leave it there." That sentence stayed with me because it was so simple. He could not leave it there. My own father had left it there for years. 3 days after the dinner, my assistant buzzed my office a little after 10. "There is a Roland Harris in the lobby," she said. "He says he is your father." My hand stopped over a contract. "Send him up." "Are you sure?" My assistant is young, but she has an old soul and a face that gives away nothing. She had picked up enough from my sudden family silence to know this was not a normal Tuesday. "I'm sure." My father stepped out of the elevator holding his hat in both hands. I had never seen him in my office before. He looked smaller there, not physically exactly, but out of context. At the plant, he knew where to stand. At home, he knew which chair was his. In my office, with glass walls and city light and framed acquisition tombstones on the shelf, he looked like a man who had walked onto the wrong stage. "Hi, Daddy," I said. "Imani." He looked around. Not in wonder exactly, more like he was gathering evidence after the verdict. "You want coffee?" "No, thank you." He sat only after I gestured to the chair. Even then, he perched on the edge with his hat in his lap, turning it slowly. He did not start with, "I'm sorry." I noticed. He started with what scared him. "I came about the retirement." There it was. The daughter in me felt the old bruise. The owner in me understood the question. "What about it?" He cleared his throat. "The pension. The bonus. Devin mentioned a consulting option. After Friday, after what your mother said, after all of it, I figured you might want to reconsider." "Reconsider. Pull it," he said, looking down at the hat. "Or change it. I wouldn't blame you if you did. I sat back. That was the moment that told me more than the banquet hall had. My father had driven 2.5 hours not because he had finally understood the wound, but because he thought power meant punishment. He thought the daughter he had dismissed would use money the way shame had been used in our house, as a tool to make somebody smaller. "Daddy," I said, "look at me." He did. "Your retirement package is safe." His eyes moved once. "All of it?" "All of it. Pension, service bonus, consulting option if you choose to sign it. I approved it last week before the dinner." He stared at me like I had spoken too quickly. "Before?" "Before." "You knew it was mine?" "Yes." The hat stopped turning. "And you signed it anyway." "I signed it because you worked 40 years and the package was appropriate." He looked toward the window. Columbus moved below us. Cars and buses and people who did not know or care that Roland Harris was sitting in his daughter's office trying to understand her. "I thought you might—" He stopped. "Punish you." His jaw worked. "I suppose." "With your retirement." He nodded once, ashamed. I let the silence sit long enough to become useful. "That package belongs to your work," I said. "Not to my feelings. You earned it on the plant floor. I was not going to touch it because of what happened in our family. I don't know how you separate that. That's the job." He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw not just regret but confusion. He had spent his life understanding work as obedience. Show up, do what you are told, take what they give you, hope nobody above you decides to be cruel. I had built a life where being above somebody meant learning not to become the cruelty you survived. "Your mother," he began. I raised one hand. "Please don't start with Mama." He closed his mouth. "You came here about money," I said. "So let me answer the money. It is safe. You came here about business. So let me answer business. At Breyer, you are a 40-year employee with a clean record and earned benefits. No one is touching that. Devin knows I expect professionalism. If anybody gives you trouble because of Friday, he will handle it." My father's shoulders lowered by 1/2 inch. Relief, immediate and visible. That hurt too. "Now," I said, "if you want to talk about being my father, that is a different conversation." He looked down at his hat again. "I don't know where to start." "You could start with the kitchen table." He shut his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. I watched his hands, the hands that had fixed machines and signed my dream away like a man swatting a fly. "I remember the paper," he said finally. "Do you?" "Not all of it, but I remember writing on it." "Why?" He rubbed his thumb along the brim of his hat. "Because I was scared." That answer surprised me enough that I did not speak. He kept going, slow, like each word had to be pulled from a locked drawer. "You were 22, no degree, talking about loans and trucks and sleeping in cabs. I thought if I signed, I was helping you ruin your life." "So you called it a real job issue." "I thought work meant a place, a time clock, benefits, somebody else responsible for the roof." "And Mama's line?" His face tightened. "I should have stopped her." "Yes." "I didn't." "No." That was the closest we got to an apology in the first 10 minutes. It was not enough, but it was a door cracked open, and I had learned to notice the difference between a locked door and a cracked one. "Do you know what hurt the most Friday?" I asked. He looked up. "Not that Mama said it. She has been saying it for years. What hurt was you looking at the floor." His eyes filled. He blinked hard, embarrassed by them. I didn't know what to do. "You could have said, 'Cassandra, stop.'" He nodded. "You could have asked me one question in 12 years. He nodded again. "You could have wondered who I became after you wrote no." The tears did not fall, but they stayed in his eyes. My father had cried maybe 3 times in my life that I had seen, once when his mother died, once when a coworker lost a hand at the plant, once when my nephew was born premature and made it through the night. This was almost the 4th. "I'm sorry," he said. It was rough, not polished, no explanation attached, no but, no if you felt. Just 2 words trying to stand up under 12 years. I wanted to accept them cleanly. I really did. There is a child in every grown woman who still wants the repaired thing handed back whole. But apology is not a time machine. "Thank you," I said. I needed to hear it, but I don't know what it changes yet. He took that like a man taking a weight he had earned. "Your mother wanted me to ask if you would come Sunday." I almost laughed, not because it was funny. "To church?" "Dinner after." "So she can control the explanation." He did not answer. "Daddy, I am not coming to help Mama clean up a mess she still thinks I made. She is embarrassed." "She should be." He flinched. I softened my voice, not the boundary. "Embarrassment is not the same as harm. She embarrassed herself. She harmed me. Those are different things." He sat with that. I could see the sentence bothering him in a useful way. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "I want the lying to stop." "It will." "You cannot promise that for Mama." "I can promise it for me." That was the first sentence of his that sounded like a choice. I nodded. "Then start there." He stayed for 20 more minutes. We talked about the plant in a way we never had. Not father and confused daughter, not retiree and mysterious owner. 2 people who both understood work from opposite ends of the building. He asked about the first truck. Not because he already knew the answer and wanted to correct me, because he did not know and finally seemed embarrassed by the not knowing, so I told him. The broken passenger mirror. The winter roots. Ellis at the credit union. Marcus, my first driver. The customer who almost sank me. The warehouse with the bad roof. I did not give him the whole story. He had not earned the whole story yet. But I gave him a beginning. When he stood to leave, he paused at my office door. 3 years, he said. Yes. I worked for my own child. You worked for a company your child built. He nodded slowly, accepting the correction. I was proud of that plant, he said. You should be. I didn't know I should have been proud of you too. There was no answer to that would not either comfort him too much or punish him too neatly, so I said, now you know. After he left, I sat alone in my office and took out the yellow legal pad page. For the first time in years, I thought about throwing it away. I even walked to the shred bin with it. Then I stopped. Not because I still needed the wound, because I finally understood the page had changed jobs. For 12 years, it had reminded me not to ask the wrong people for permission. Now it could remind me that the wrong people may one day learn they were wrong, and I still do not have to hand them the pen again. I folded it and put it back in my wallet. My mother did not call for 9 days. When she finally did, she left a message that said, I am sorry things got out of hand. That was not an apology. That was a weather report. I did not return it. Portia sent one long text about how I had destabilized the family dynamic. I had to read that phrase twice because it sounded like something from a therapy book she bought but did not finish. She said our parents were old, that I had always been private to the point of cruelty, and that if I really loved Daddy, I would not make his retirement about my ego. I typed 3 different answers and deleted all of them. Then I sent, I will talk when you are ready to discuss facts instead of roles. She did not answer. For a while, the fallout was mostly quiet. That is how real consequences often are. Not explosions, empty chairs, short phone calls, invitations that do not come, people choosing sides without announcing it. At church, my mother discovered that respectability can turn on the person who worships it. Pearl called me once and said awkwardly but kindly, Baby, I owe you an apology. I believed what I was handed. That meant more than I expected. Miss Louise sent a card to my office with no message except, Congratulations on your company, underlined twice. At the plant, Devin kept things steady. My father finished his transition with more dignity than he feared. A few men teased him gently, and Devin shut down the one who took it too far. Gideon told my father, from what I heard later, Roland, if my daughter owned the place, I'd be bragging till folks crossed the street to avoid me. That made me smile when Devin told me. My father signed the consulting agreement. Not because he needed the money, though money is always welcome in retirement. He said he wanted to help train the young mechanics before he fully stepped away. I approved it through the normal process and made sure someone else handled the direct paperwork so nobody at Monarch could say I had favored him. That is another thing people misunderstand about power. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is build a process that does not bend just because your feelings walked into the room. 2 months later, my father called me on a Saturday morning. Not my assistant, not the office, my cell. "I am replacing the back steps," he said. "Okay. At your mother's house," I assumed. "I was thinking about that first truck you told me about, the mirror." I waited. "How did you fix it?" It was such a small question. Too small for 12 years, too late for the woman I used to be. But it was a question. So I answered. "Junkyard outside Springfield, $25. "Wrong color." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course you did." We spoke for 11 minutes. I know because I looked at the call log after. 11 minutes about truck mirrors, back steps, weather, and whether the consulting schedule was too much on his knees. My mother did not get on the phone. That was fine. I am not going to wrap this up with a clean bow and tell you we became the kind of family that hugs in matching sweaters. We did not. My mother still has not given me an apology I can use. Portia and I speak in careful texts, mostly about our nephews. Trevor sent me a private note saying he had always respected what I built, which was nice and also a little late. My father is trying in the only way he understands, by asking practical questions and showing up in small, awkward increments. Last month he came to Columbus again, this time invited, and I walked him through one of our warehouses. Not the executive office, the warehouse. I wanted him to see the moving parts, the forklifts, the pick lines, the drivers checking routes, the kind of work he respects. He stood near the loading dock watching a 26-foot box truck back in clean on the first try. "You started with one of those," he said, "older and uglier. And I told you no." "Yes?" He nodded, not asking me to soften it, just letting the facts stand. I was wrong. I looked at him, and for once I did not rush to make the truth easier for him. "Yes," I said. "You were." Then we watched the truck dock. That was the whole moment. No music, no speech. Just my father standing beside me in a building I owned, watching work happen, finally understanding that my life had been real long before he recognized it. The yellow legal pad page is still in my wallet. It is not as sharp as it used to be. Sometimes when I see it, I do not feel the kitchen anymore. I feel the hallway outside the banquet room. I feel the weight of my good coat. I hear Devin's quiet voice saying, "Your daughter's company signs my paycheck." I see my father turn around slowly, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because truth had finally entered the room and called everybody by their right name. If there is anything I want you to take from this, it is not that you should wait for a perfect public moment to prove people wrong. Do not build your life around their faces when they find out. That is still letting them be the audience that matters most. Build because the work is yours. Build because your gift needs somewhere to go. Build because a closed door is not the same thing as a locked future. And when the people who dismissed you finally discover what you have made, you do not have to punish them with it. You also do not have to shrink it so they can stay comfortable. That was my story. One banquet hall, one old legal pad, 80 witnesses, and a father who worked for his daughter for 3 years without knowing it. If someone in your life keeps introducing you by your lowest season, share this with a person who needs the reminder. Leave a comment for the ones who had to build quietly, and subscribe if you want more stories about women who stopped asking the wrong people to measure their worth.